Oh, quit crying.
Fixed income, I'm pretty sure you've got a job.
Are you saying get a real job?
He's not a fixed.
But a part-time job is a real job. It's fine.
Get on the violin.
Are we ready to press the button? Okay, we're live. So just remember that. So we call the meeting back to order. And we're on 6.1B, financial information services, quarter three update.
All right, good morning, council. This is our quarterly report for the finance department. It sort of encapsulates the last two quarters, as I wasn't able to bring a Q2 report specifically, but this will cover some data from both Q2 and Q3, as well as year-to-date numbers and projections. So achievements for the quarters, as always, we're posting the council and CAO quarterly remuneration and expenses on the website. Council approved final revisions to the 22-23 operating capital budget back on September 8th, which is technically in Q2, even though it feels like about a year and a half ago. Policy P25, the low income tax exemptions, was also revised. That was, again, feels quite a long time ago. Final tax bills were also issued in September, and we met all our requirements for submitting the 21-22 annual reports to the province, so including the audited financial statements, the financial information report, and the statements of estimate. So that would be, those are budget forms that we do each year. We continue to work on the implementation of the new standard for asset retirement obligations. So we've completed the scoping exercises to identify the categories of assets that are falling into this new accounting standard, and we are into the measurement phase of that now. Some metrics for the second and third quarter follow on the table. Just below, I've added another line to update the bids and tenders that was approved last year for e-procurement activities is now up and running, and we're looking to have the first procurement activities going through that portal very shortly. So the water supply loans, we have one new loan and we've had one loan pay itself off. So the total number is 16 still. So the total loans, we had a new $10,000 loan this year, and 8,000 was the one that was paid off completely. It's a total outstanding of just over $100,000. The final tax bills issued, there were 13,914 bills, and the outstanding tax bills as at February 6th was $1,556,981, which represents about 8% of the total tax bills issued for the year. And that's down a bit from previous years at this time. So we're collecting well. And also just an update on the non-tax invoices processed. I brought this last quarterly update. It's, you know, the types of invoices for vendors and that type of work, just to give an idea of the volumes of things being processed through finance. So the two-quarter total for Qs 2 and 3, 2,882. That's a 29% increase in volume compared to the same period from the previous year.
Why would that be?
It does fluctuate over, like, so it's not, but it is in general going up. That level of increase is higher than we would normally see. I wouldn't expect it to continue that high. It's just sort of an indication of the general growth.
What's the largest item in that 2,800? What?
The largest item,
Like you get
probably the compactor purchase would be the largest one, I think, for this recent period.
non-tax invoice, because I'm not
So for
understanding.
power bills would be a non-tax, an invoice that somebody submits that needs to be paid.
Just a bill, just a.
Yeah, a bill, yeah. So,
No, it's just a biggie. That's all.
Yeah, just paying your bills. Okay.
yeah, exactly. It's the payable side, whereas taxes are the revenue side, just trying to
I thought
clarify.
it was more complicated.
No, it's just basically a measure of the volume of payables activity over the period.
But yeah, compactor would certainly add.
Yeah, I don't know if technically that would be fit in there because we just paid that one, but those are an example of some of the big ones.
I had misunderstood what it was.
Okay,
So the HST on the compactor would be significant. I would think that we get that back, right?
we get the majority of HST back. We don't get full
You don't get
HST
full,
credit,
okay.
but I think our net HST amounts are just over 4%, 4 point.
Okay, because I know when private business, you get the full amount as a credit. So I wasn't sure how municipalities work.
Yeah, I think we get just over 10% credited back to us overall.
Oh, okay.
Here's a new section I've added for this quarter, and that's investment activities. So in March of 2022, after 2 years of historically low interest rates, the Bank of Canada began increasing their policy interest rate. Between March 2nd of 22 and January 25th of 23, the Bank of Canada increased the rate 8 consecutive times, beginning at 0.25%, and the current rate is now 4.5%.
That's a lot.
I like what you did there, Tim.
That's a huge increase over a very short time, one that we have not seen in my experience. And so
It's worth keeping your money in the bank.
our
That's
bank
what he
accounts, our cash accounts earn us an average interest rate of the Bank of Canada policy rate plus 0.25. So that means that over that same period, our cash deposit interest rate has gone from 0.5% to 4.75%. So the increase on September 7th pushed our cash interest rate up to 3.5. And so a week after that, we elected to redeem 5 redeemable GICs that we were holding at an average interest rate of 2.34% for a total face value of $11.31 million. And this was because we were earning higher interest on our cash deposits than we were on those GICs. So we cashed those out and put that money into the bank where it could earn us a little bit extra. And then at the same time, we also sent a request to 3 major Canadian banks for proposals on a 5-year, $10 million investment. And then the next day we selected the best of those options, which was a 5-year non-redeemable GIC at 4.92%. This is intended to be the majority of our existing long-term liability for the landfill. So that's locked in us at just shy of $500,000 of interest income per year on that investment, which offsets the cost we have to recognize going forward each year for that long-term liability.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense. Can't spend that money anyway.
At the beginning of the 22-23 fiscal year, we also held 1 non-redeemable GIC with a face value of just under $1.5 million with an interest rate of only 1.16%. This GIC matured on January 3rd, and the value was just over 1.5 million. And this has been moved into the operating reserve cash account where it's currently earning the cash interest amount of 4.75. Priorities for Q4 include the biggest priority, of course, is getting you the capital and operating budget for the upcoming fiscal year. And you've seen some pieces of that already in the capital last week.
Yeah.
And we expect to have the more fulsome presentation to you in about 2 weeks' time. We also continue our work on the asset retirement obligation standards change. So that, as I mentioned, we're working on the measurement aspect of that right now to identify the potential costs that we need to include in the calculations of these liabilities. And we'll have more information for that at year end as we go through the audit. We also continue work on our procurement process updates. So we've begun the process of updating our P cards, or what would be known as our corporate credit cards, to a more specific and controllable system that allows for better and more controlled we can expand the use of the cards while also minimizing the availability of use of them. So it allows us more flexibility as well as more control over those. Yeah. And then landfill long-term strategy work has been a big piece that I've been working very closely with Manny in particular on, and that's for some very long-term financial analyses to identify risks and opportunities. And we expect to bring very detailed presentations on that work to you in the next month or 2. The next couple pages include the financial forecast. So the operating fund financial forecast based on the 9 months ended December 31st, and then a projection out to the full year. Based on that projection, we're showing an expected surplus in operating fund of $1,160,285. And the following 2 pages show that broken down. The first page here will be the revenues by program area, and the second page is the expenditures by program area. And we have a projected variance percent, and some explanations. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these for you now, but some highlights right at the top: property taxes and grants in lieu. We're projecting a $558,000 favorable variance. That is primarily due to increased deep transfer tax revenues above the budget.
Show me that where I can find it, where I have my screen.
Right at the top of page 3, very first line.
Yeah, just Kim, what does GIL stand for?
Grants in lieu.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So we get grants in lieu of taxes for certain line items. They tend to be much smaller
Okay.
than the
Thank
actual
you.
taxes.
Yep.
Some other highlights would be a $911,000 favorable revenue variance in the landfill. This is about 2/3 of the way down that page. This is due primarily to higher volumes than budgeted. When we built the budget for the landfill for the year, there were concerns about capacity due to the new cell being constructed. And so we budgeted for reduced volumes from, in particular, HRM, because we didn't have a contract and we could control those volumes. And excuse me, bless you, sorry. However, because further work had been done to identify that we could still maintain the volumes that they were generally bringing us, we were able to accept those higher volumes, and that's showing in a favorable revenue variance.
So can I ask you a question on the transfer tax?
The deed transfer tax, yes.
It doesn't have its own column, does it?
No, although I did include the same chart that I showed in the last quarterly update. It's at the end of the presentation. In general, the deed transfer tax is still coming in at a historically high rate.
Still, okay.
It is showing signs of reducing the growth, but it is still, as now, quite high.
Pot of money.
Yeah. And we are allocating 50% of that deed transfer tax to the development reserve that was created last year. And so that impacts some of the other variances.
Yeah, that's where I was trying to find that here.
It's included within program areas, so it's in that top line, the property taxes and grants.
And I see your variance explanation. I don't see it as its own line item.
Yeah, it's not in its own item, it's a line item, it is part of the property taxes line item.
Thank you.
On the expenditure side, the real big piece here, right at the bottom, it's the transfers to reserves. We're anticipating 1.49 million transfers to reserves above budgeted. And I actually have some more detail on reserve transfers to and from on the following page. In general, there's savings on reduced costs across a number of areas. For example, at the top, you look at council, you see that there's reduced admin expenses, so that's less travel, conferences, accommodations, that kind of thing.
Don't go for lunch or anything anymore.
Yeah, we still haven't got up to the activities that we were all at pre-COVID.
No.
Because as much as some things say we are post-COVID, well, we are not in some respects as well. I'm going to go forward to the transfers to and from reserves on the following page. So this one, it's a little bit different to look at variances, right? So a transfer to reserve is considered an expense for the operating account. So if we're transferring more to reserves, that shows up as a higher expense and therefore an unfavorable or negative variance. So it kind of swaps here. And similarly, on the other side, a transfer from reserves is a revenue to the operating fund. And so if we're transferring less out of the reserve, that's again showing as lower revenues and unfavorable. So the budget for the transfers from reserve was $1,551,470. We're projecting that to be $1,340,919. So that's a projected year-end variance of $210,551. You can see the breakdown of what makes up that $210,000 variance, primarily due to that contingency that we haven't drawn from. There was the water supply program that would have been funded from that contingency if it were needed. It was not needed, so we have not drawn from that, or we're not planning to. And the wind reserve economic development portion. So there was some Kaiser Meadow Industrial Park planning work that was expected to be done in the budget. We were budgeting to use some consultants and outside parties, but we were able to manage that inside. So we did not have to draw from reserve to fund that. On the transfers to reserves, the budget was $3,923,976, and the projected full year amount is $5,414,976. That's a projected year-end variance of $1,491,000. And again, you can see the breakdown of the pieces that make up that number. So the deed transfer tax, since the deed transfer tax is higher than budget, 50% of that increase is being transferred. So that's an additional expense to operating of $292,500. The solid waste reserve, we're contributing more than budgeted there. We talked about the revenue increase, that's the biggest piece. And then there's a reduction in the closure, post-closure costs in the current year as compared to budget. Also, there's a transfer to reserve for the sewer. When we built the budget, it was showing an expected shortfall of revenue to expenditure in sewer, so we were budgeting for a draw of 21,000 from reserve. However, the current projection is showing a favorable variance in the sewer program area of 191,000, and so now we're budgeting to contribute that to reserve. I know it's also very simple, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good, right?
Yes, that is good.
It is.
It shows unfavorable, but it's actually a good thing.
You had to read it. I was worried when I got it.
That's why I gave the preamble.
It's
Increase in expenditures and actually all you're doing is putting it in the bank.
Yeah, it's a higher expense, but it's actually savings.
They don't budget the same way I do.
Yeah, spoken like a true accountant.
Yeah, it's surprisingly common how many people want to treat government or municipal finance as though it were their own personal finance, and there are very significant differences that mean that it's not quite the same as what people might
It's
understand.
amazing when you look at it. It's in red. It's usually a bad thing on a balance sheet.
Yeah, to be fair, I probably should have changed the color of that before I put it there.
Yeah, I'm in terrible shape. I have $1.5 million more in the bank than I did.
Yeah, for the operating reserve, it is extra expense, so it's.
Anyway.
So in summary, so the projected surplus of 1,160,285 is due to the numerous variances that are covered above. The largest projected variances, as we discussed, are the landfill for the higher revenues and lower closure, post-closure costs, and for the higher than budgeted deed transfer tax. And as I said, there are indications that the trend of accelerating deed transfer tax revenues is starting to slow. So we're very, very interested in paying attention to that every month when it comes in. And that will be part of each of our quarterly reports to you as time goes forward.
Yeah, because no matter how you make it show up in the budget, I don't want to over budget for the transfer tax if we're not going to get it.
Yeah, it really depends on, like, you know, as we're allocating it 50%, then 50% of that actually offsets the general rate. And so it does have some carry-on impacts for how we deal with that. The operating fund surplus also includes expenditures for transfers to reserve and revenues for transfers from reserve, as we just discussed. And so when considering the higher than projected net increase in reserve funds, so if you take the projected surplus plus the extra savings, it's actually a favorability of just over $2.8 million for the year.
What percent of our total budget is that?
So total revenue budget is
I could have looked at the.
29,758,000. So that is just under 10%.
10%.
Yeah. And then I included the chart for deed transfer tax. This is without context in the report, but I know that that's something that helps people understand. So you can see that it is still, each of those color bars is representing a quarter. So we've got the first 3 quarters of 22-23 shown on the right-hand side. And then we'll still have Q4, although Q4 tends to be the lowest of the 4 quarters. So you can see we're already above the whole budget for the year, and there is still 3 months to recognize there.
Yeah.
Are there any additional questions?
Any questions, people? No, thank you very much.
No, and I'd just like to say, Tim, transferring those accounts into a higher interest rate is, I mean, obviously that's your job, but I commend you on that, to looking out for our financial interest. I guess that's all I'd like to say.
Somewhat of an unprecedented time for
A
that.
down payment on a new ring.
What's that there?
A down payment on a new ring.
There you go, see? Yeah, thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Ted.
Okay, well, we might as well move right along to 6.2. Corporate strategic management, strategic priorities chart update. Morning.
Morning all.
Good morning. Morning.
So, if you recall, on December 1st, we reviewed the priorities chart. So that's the refresher, that's the the living document that keeps track of the various strategic priorities set by council, along with any significant operational capital initiatives that may influence the prioritization of what we're doing. So this is, as we always say, a living document. So what I'm looking for today, before you today, is looking for council's approval, endorsement of the current snapshot, the current version of the priorities chart as it exists as of February 1st, while we made some additional adjustments around February 10th. So
Wasn't that long ago?
so just to briefly recap, during our discussion at the committee of the whole on December 1st, we went through it practically line by line. And at that point, staff had brought forward a number of recommendations about things that should be added or updated or even removed. And council reviewed those and at that time seemed fine with those decisions. So that summary is on page 2 and 3. So those removed are, it's just, there's a long list there. So do you have it? I mean, I could run through those again. If anyone has any questions to revisit why something was removed or added, by all means, nope. Okay. So those changes then have just been sort of solidified in the chart. So then the next piece of that, beginning on page 3, the updates that were provided that were added following council's direction during that meeting. So these were the things that were some new initiatives that needed to be brought forward. So those have been captured in here too. The one thing I will add, we also changed under economic development, the arts and culture strategy was listed as under the sector marketing strategy piece. It's now been broken out into its own because it is a significant project and there are some distinct phases to that. So that you'll see on that top page, that's how that's broken down. So the other changes, and they're highlighted in blue on the chart. So just to briefly run through those. So we added under governance and engagement priority area, under operational initiatives, we added the request for direction on dust and demolition regulations. So that's a part of our bylaw and policy work. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I remember doing.
All right. Under the healthy and vibrant communities priority, a strategic priority was added. Regarding under accessibility planning, we added a request for direction concerning options for the Wild Rose surface upgrade to make it an accessible trail. So that's coming forward. We also added the public moorings initiative and a request for direction on a possible program scope around that.
Yeah.
We also added under that same priority area, under operational initiatives, the lighting in the village of Chester. So a report will be coming forward regarding that. So those are the changes made to, or the additions to the health environment communities. Then the only other one that was added following council's direction was the infrastructure and service delivery priority area. And that what was added was the unopened provincial roads piece. So there will be a request for direction, which will include a registry of unopened provincial roads for council's review.
And what it is we want to do. about it.
Exactly.
What page is that on?
So that's on page 4, sorry.
Page,
Yeah. So those are the changes in summary.
yeah. Tina?
Just as a question around the registry of unopened provincial roads,
Yeah,
that registry is across the municipality, correct?
that's my understanding, yeah.
Excellent. That'll be good information.
Yeah, just what are they and do we have an interest?
That's right.
Yeah.
We also, sorry, can I just interject there? We had some discussion about, we have some unopened roads or rights of way. Are those included in that?
I think that's what's
I think,
included.
yeah, it's all, we're supposed to be quite comprehensive in that respect, yeah.
Or provincial roads?
Yeah.
I'm talking about the ones that the municipality owns.
Oh, okay.
We own rights of way on the commons, for example,
Oh, that's right.
49.5.
Yeah, we do own some. I mean, that's another thing I think that at some stage of the game we have to discuss, but
Yeah.
it wasn't what we
I
were
thought that was
asked.
part and parcel of this inventory we were going to do though.
We could add that, I assume, to as part of that same process.
I don't think they're hard. Sam, you probably know where they all are, you have a list of them. So-
Yeah, we just knew where they were, then we could decide what we want to do.
Can you just tell me what an unopened provincial road means? I'm not sure.
Maybe Tara could speak.
Well, I just want, I.
Unused, abandoned.
They're abandoned and unused right of ways that the province, either they were identified as extensions of roads at one time.
So it's just a mess of stuff.
Well, not a mess.
If you go from Chester Basin to New Ross,
Mhm.
they built a new road. Off on the left in most cases, there's an old provincial right of way runs through there
Right.
that they moved the road, so it's there. So that's one example.
That's one.
Yeah, the one that I'm most interested in, or probably not most, but in the village, we have streets,
That run
Brandon
down to
Street,
the ocean.
Brunswick Street, that go down to the water.
Yeah,
That we had a negotiation ongoing with the province 20-some years ago, when we gave away or consented to the giving away of a right of way around the water, that we would have access to the water by these unopened roads.
They're woods.
And we basically dropped the ball on it, I think, and now it's back on the agenda. But there's half a dozen or more that will give us access, give the public access to the water. All we had to do is get them from the province and we own them. And that's my goal, is that and I know we're proceeding in that regard, but there's a number around. I'm not sure what you have to do around some, just familiar with the ones that we have in the village. And outside in the commons, we have our own 49.5 foot rights of way, some of which we've given away to abutting landowners, and some of which we retain, and some of which would be excellent sites for extending the sewer there.
Yeah.
That's why I want to keep them and identify them.
makes sense.
And all we're doing is looking for an inventory. Somebody shows a list of what's out there.
Yeah.
And then we can decide if we want to do anything.
Okay.
I don't, yeah, there's lots of discussion, I'll just say short.
So, any further questions or anything missing, any further changes?
It says here on the list that the landfill financial model is complete. I understood that when we made that request, it was going to come back to us so that we could actually do some sort of like planning scenarios. But I don't remember that happening.
Tim was gonna have that in what you said, a month or two.
So, Manny and I have been putting together some stuff. There are some specific scenarios that are of importance and need to be addressed right away that have come out of some of this work, and that's what we'll be bringing to you first. And that will be provided in a much more detailed presentation.
Okay, option one is to approve the priorities chart.
Yeah,
You need a motion for that?
Should have.
Please, you know, just,
Oh, sorry, I
Just
didn't
gonna
know
go right
yet.
into the chart now, because that was the changes.
Yeah.
But we're just gonna focus on this now, I guess, are we on this yet, or?
well, those changes are a summary of what's all been put in
So,
place in the
right,
chart.
so I just have
Okay.
to find my way here. My iPad doesn't seem to be working well. So I'm just gonna go, okay, so I can't find it here, my iPad doesn't seem to be working, but the options report for the short-term rentals, all that jazz, it says on here, the senior planner presented to mayors and wardens meeting will address Airbnb rentals. Can you update on that a little bit, or did you already? I'm just wondering where that is, because some people are asking and I can't answer.
So council gave direction for staff to prepare some options, so that's on, it's moved over to my department now. And you'll probably be seeing, I would like to see something probably Q2. So sometime June, July, in that area.
Perfect, and I understand other work duty, you know, yeah, like to see, and sometimes it gets changed a bit. And again, I can't find it on here, but it's the whole Hahn property and Mr. Hutton. And I thought when I read it last evening, I couldn't quite remember when he was here, when we had the discussions, and we got back to him, and it was a 1-year timeline. That seems to be quite lengthy to me. Maybe I'm forgetting some timing there or something. But did that come back to us, and where are we with that in terms of his business plan?
that agreement was signed, first of March, and so that 12-year, that sort of that 12-month period is just, going to expire. So we have, staff have reached out to Mr. Hutton, and he's preoccupied with some other things, but he has expressed that he will get back to us.
Fair enough.
So we need to report from him on what the status.
Yes, and again, I'm not being, trying not to be mean, I'm just, being respectful of everybody's outside variables and things come into play in life and so on, but I just couldn't quite remember. But it is about just, it's only on the year right now, so, okay, thank you for that, so.
Floyd was
Just-
next.
Just probably something that'll clear it up on this week or whatever. Capital projects on the sidewalks. I know we passed the other day to Chester Basin sidewalks. And Hubbard sidewalks to do this preliminary work with it. Is that, should that be shown here or what is? It's nothing here about that.
We could include them here, yeah.
So should they be, is my question.
Well, I mean, this is my colleagues with IAO would list them if they felt that they were significant projects that might inform or shape their decisions around other priorities. So if they're not listed, then it doesn't mean they're not happening just because they're not listed here.
It's just general work.
Yeah,
Okay, so the work's gonna be done.
Yeah.
That's fine. Now, I don't have to see it on.
Yeah.
It's gonna be.
Understood.
Okay.
Gary?
On the, page number, sorry. You'll see fire service contract.
Yeah.
Action. With the Chester Fire Service contract done. I don't think that's done.
Yeah, you're right, that one, we probably need to reopen.
It was done.
It was done, and we need to reopen it, yeah.
We didn't get there.
Well, it was signed, wasn't it?
We did.
And now we want to reopen it. Okay, so it was done. Maybe we should put was in front of it.
Yeah. I missed that one.
was done.
Was done.
Yeah.
Was done.
Now it's.
Less done than before.
It's undone.
It's undone.
I'm done.
Well, they haven't really technically done it yet.
And I just
Yeah, we
want
still have a signed
Just
contract.
We still have a signed contract.
still have a signed contract.
We're still talking.
So it's not wrong.
So we can adjust that, absolutely.
Well, maybe, I was just confused whether or not it had been done again.
Understood.
Now,
Yeah.
yes,
And-
Yeah, I'm just got that, to build on some other points. We talked, I think we had some sort of workshop not so long ago, to talk about, central sewers. We know we want to proceed with, some, improvement on the catchment area of the Chester sewer. Talking about, where is it in here that we're talking about bringing, more capacity to Chester Basin?
It's not listed right now. I think it gets to a point where it's when something becomes particularly actionable, when there's a defined action around it, then I think.
we're
that would
waiting
be-
for the report on that.
Yeah.
Well, one of you just mentioned it in your report, where you're doing an RFP in a couple of months or something like that.
Where it should be cited and the cost associated with it.
Yeah.
See who's interested in joining up.
And once you finish that work, then we decide whether we're gonna add this.
Yes, for the next step.
Two quick
I
questions.
just wanted to add on that, sorry, Nick, Jared.
No, go ahead.
You mentioned, that we have, some unopened, rights of way that connect into the commons. You know, I think you and I have both talked a lot about how many people travel the commons, they walk the commons, there's a need to put the sewer out there. But, we've never really had a deeper conversation here about how to improve capacity of the commons, or old Trumps area, it's called. And I don't know where we get to have that conversation, even if it was just at a concept level, or how we could even get a consultant to bring back something for us to talk about. I don't know, I don't have,
Capacity of sewer.
and maybe even active transportation in
Oh,
that
active
way.
It's been,
Yeah, well, I know, but we already chose our priorities on the sewer for the year.
Yeah, that's fine, but I mean, I feel like you need to get some concept stuff kind of in the hopper so that in 2 years, then we can have more discussions about other projects.
I think the other thing that's been done perhaps is it's been identified as one of the prime potential growth areas.
Hmm.
but we haven't done anything to promote that, and that's what we've been talking about. And I'd like to get it somehow on a discussion agenda, if it's with planning staff or public works, I don't know with whom. Or maybe at a committee of the whole meeting. Because it is an area that's been long overlooked and has great potential if we give it some attention.
I feel like we talked about it in terms of like a need for housing and like there's a whole lot of reasons why it's kind of, we've brushed up against it, but we haven't really done anything really much with it.
So is there sewer in the ponds? Oh, there's not.
We are doing that growth study.
We're all doing a growth plan.
Yeah, once we do that, then we'll know where we wanna focus.
That may well inform further actions in.
It should capture it in that flooding, I would
I
hope.
thought that was more access to
Well, we expanded to almost that.
Yeah,
We did, yeah.
we did.
You'll have a report coming next week on, I think it's next week that it's on the agenda for the growth plan and a scope of work for that. And so I think what it says right now is, what it's recommending is that we focus on, we do the entire municipality with exit 6 as the first pilot area. But that doesn't mean we couldn't add additional pilot area or additional areas in there, but it
No,
probably.
we just gotta start.
Yeah, what you'll probably see coming out of that, I would think, is that there's a need to do additional planning in certain areas, and the comments with one of those
Yeah,
areas.
I would say so, like, when I think of like what exit 6 needs, it's like some amount of infrastructure, and I feel like Commons is like 5% of the scale of what we're talking about it covers, but it still needs to be done because it's pretty important.
Well, that's why we added the gross grid, the entire municipality to the gross
Yeah,
grid.
you'll see that coming.
So when we expand, 103 gets expanded to exit 7.
Yeah.
If we were ready, it would be a prime area for expansion. We know that, we'll have that discussion.
Yeah,
2 other questions on this list, just which ones if I may.
yeah.
Tax exemption bylaw review, I thought that was done. I mean, was that the amendments we made for
Low
Yeah, I think that
income.
low income?
That was done.
Oh, that was done? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That one,
That one is done.
yeah, that one's done.
Well,
Just that.
And is there anything in here, and I can't find it, the review of the Airbnb? Are we still waiting for the province to come down with something? Is it?
That's what Councilor
Yeah.
Connors asked about short-term accommodation regulations, so you'll see that probably in Q2.
There's nothing in here on it.
It is on here, I think it
Okay.
says short-term.
Can you show me where it is?
It's in the
In this shop.
health environment. Oh, you got it.
And I should have also mentioned that you might see something coming sooner on that, because you'll probably have a discussion around the events levy soon. And there are options there on how we apply the events levy, if council's interested in
A lot of parking
expanding
funded
that.
out of this.
You call it short-term rental, I call it Airbnb, or fabulous.
Yeah.
Same thing,
Same thing.
same thing.
Thank you.
Okay,
Sorry, one more,
Okay.
on the Enviro toilets, and it's under capital projects, Enviro toilets, it's green, it's on the bottom of the page. And it talks about confirm locations done, confirm the type of toilets done, and I'll skip over procurement, and then installation, Q1. It's very exciting, so expectation would be spring installation of all those identified locations. So we're doing, how many are we doing again? 8, 10, I don't know.
I don't, we have to ask Jill.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers right
Yeah.
here, but we've just been going through the procurement process, so we're gonna look at options, and then with the intent of the installation.
Wow, this,
Exciting.
yeah, it is really, in terms of, again, people being out and about in our community, I mean, all the above, we know that. Excellent, thank you.
Any other questions? So are we prepared to approve the priority chart?
Yeah, this is good, thank you.
Well,
Motion to approve the priorities chart.
Second,
Second.
discussion, all those in favor, opposed, motion carried.
thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you. Hmm. 6.3.
Okay, I think this one's me. And I have, so Fred and Tim and Manny are all here to help inform this discussion a little bit. If you recall, council, back in August, you received a report recommending a wastewater capital charge to recover capital costs for new developments. So this is, you requested a little bit more information at that time, so this is the follow-up report on that. So just as some background, in 2014, council approved a common annual sewer rate, that's the EDUs, the equivalent dwelling unit charge that is charged annually. That fee, that charge is used to fund the existing system, including the maintenance and operations and upgrades to the existing system. But it was not designed to fund capital costs for expansions of the system and capacity upgrades. So just as a reminder, there's 5 points there on the principles that were used when council established the EDU. So making sure that there was a fair system under which rates were established, minimizing the impact on lower income system users, ensuring that the charges did not stifle development opportunities for the system users, making sure that the users of the system bear the costs associated with the systems, and ensuring consistency. And at that time, it was identified that the EDU was the first step in ensuring sustainability of the wastewater systems. But that additional work would be needed to identify the additional sewer opportunities to service future economic growth and development, and to develop a plan for replacing the sewer treatment plants and upgrades done with larger goals in mind. So we have had the workshop, and we now have a work plan for the systems. So the next step for our discussion, I think, is looking at a capital development charge to ensure financial sustainability of the system as we look towards expanding and upgrading the system. So as we upgrade and expand the system, it not only benefits the current and future users of the system, but there's benefits to the broader community. So I think there's some discussion to be had at some point around how, and probably as we do each project as they come forward, discussions around how we fund those projects, looking at uses such as the Community Canada Building Fund, formerly the gas tax, the new infrastructure development fund. So this capital contribution charge is not necessarily intended to or expected to cover the entire cost of those upgrades, but it will offset and be one component of the funding formula. So I'll skip over to the areas of discussion and when we're recommending that we apply the charges. So we're recommending that charges be applied for unserviced and remainder lots once they request to be serviced. And then we're recommending that we establish, we don't have to settle on a name, not necessarily service boundaries, but a capital charge area for each of the systems. And so for all lots within those wastewater connection areas or those capital charge areas, we would levy the charge on all lots upon issuance of a building or development permit. And the calculated charge would apply to new development connections and to changes of use where the use resulted in a higher EDU than the existing uses. So we would make two calculations there, the charges that would be payable on the lot based on the proposed use, the charge that would be payable on the lot if a development permit had been issued on the existing use, and then the difference between the two would be the fee that would be due. So we would need to come back with some defined areas, some service areas for each of the proposed systems where the charge would be levied. And then there's some discussion to be had, I think, around the fact that some of the properties right now are currently paying 0.3 of an EDU
That's what I meant.
as a sort of holding fee. So there's a couple options there that we're presenting. You could look at exempting those lots for the first EDU that they connect to. So if they're paying 0.3 now and they want to connect and they're connecting a single unit residential, that's one EDU charge. So you could exempt that first EDU. But if they were doing something like a multi-unit residential where the EDUs might be 2 or 4, you would exempt the first one and then they would just owe the remaining above and beyond the first.
So Tara, I don't want to interrupt you.
Yeah.
but From what I'm reading here in that area A, so exempting them from the $8,000 connection fee.
Yeah.
Anybody who's paying the,
For the first EDU, so if they were proposing a use that was equivalent to 2 EDUs, they'd be exempt for the first 8,000 and just have to pay the second 8,000.
okay, I see what you're saying, yeah, so if it's just a single, the exempt, the 8,000 doesn't get paid.
Yeah.
I got you, okay, I just want to be clear, sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that adds too much complexity.
too much complexity.
I really think that, you know, I think it's reasonable to have some sort of cost recovery charge when you put a sewer in front of service people's land, all right? You'd automatically increase the value of their property, whether they want to acknowledge it or not. And then when they make the request for, and at that point, as soon as that's in front, they should be getting the charge, the EDU charge for vacant land. If they don't develop for 5 years, they're getting charged every year the 0.3 EDUs. And then if they make the request for a lateral, then there'll be some sort of charge that we can decide. As council can decide where we're gonna put that, but some sort of recovery charge. Because it costs something for us to even put the lateral. So not to mention the sewer in front of the property. So I think that cost recovery charge, you know, now whether that cost recovery charge should be scalable based on the type of development, maybe so. You know, should a single family home pay the same cost recovery charge as, you know, a 20-unit apartment building?
Probably not.
Probably not. So we might need to get a little, we might have to turn our minds to that. Because obviously the benefit, like the capacity they're using in the system, all that stuff, it will be increased for those high volume users. But, you know, I think it is quite reasonable to have some sort of cost recovery charge for a single family home. That's quite reasonable, I think.
Yeah, me too. It's a question of, you know, I mean, and we've done it in the past, so it's not all that new, like, you know, I mean, in a lot of the cases, when I refer to Chester Business, it's simple for me, but everybody was charged $5,000 for a hookup charge, you know, which was part of the capital cost, you know. Was it enough? Probably not, it was close, but at the time, it was just the world we lived in, so we charged them $5,000. But if you're not hooking up, it's hard to charge the.
Yeah, so I think what we're proposing is that if you're a vacant lot, until you get a development permit, you wouldn't be charged. But once you get the
Once you
development
hook
permit, then you hook on, then the charge that we would charge would be based on the use that you're proposing and the difference between the two, right? So if you were already
One EDU as
paying,
opposed to 10, yes.
right, so what we're proposing is if you were already paying the 0.3, that if you're only equivalent to 1 EDU, you would not even pay the hookup.
And I'm saying that,
And you're
I
saying
disagree with
you
that.
disagree.
Yeah,
with
well, I
that.
know, I disagree with you.
You should pay the hookup regardless.
Just for the simple reason that these people that have been paying that 1/3
Aren't using the system.
have never used the system, and that's the argument I get. I said, well, that holds your space in line. So now you're gonna turn around and tell them when they wanna hook up and put a single dwelling unit on it, that we're gonna charge them an $8,000 fee after charging them the 1/3 of an ED unit since 2014. I don't think that's fair.
Well, it costs money to transport sewage in front of your house.
Well, I know,
Or
but
make it-
anyway, I'm in favor of your recommendation. That's,
Yeah, the EDU charge isn't really a capital recovery cost.
No.
Yeah, that's operational.
Yeah,
That's what that serves. And so that 0.3 is just allowing just the cost to move turds along your boundary line at the road.
but your turns aren't going in.
So are we suggesting a charge for everyone, the capital with the.
you call it a hookup charge, call it what you want.
Okay, so we're gonna do that to everyone.
So what we're proposing is that we would define an area for each of the systems, and within that area, if you do new development, that you would be charged based on whatever charge was.
As long as-
So yes, and it would be mandatory in those areas to hook up if you're doing something that's new development,
Yeah.
Okay.
right? So if you're a house that's building a new house, you wouldn't
So
necessarily have
would
to,
everyone pay a charge, like a 5,000 or whatever?
If they hook on.
if they
Okay.
hook on, or if they
Or if it's-
increase.
if it's-
Okay, but I'm confused with Andre and Adele talking.
Okay, here's
Adele's, we're saying a 0.3 charge or.
So everybody who has a piece of
Can I just
land,
ask a question? Seriously. you're saying you don't want them to have that initial charge, but if they're not paying it to start with, and everyone else is, how would that be fair? But he's saying if a 0.3 is charged to a land and they never hook up to it for 4 years, 4 years time they do, that they would be waived that charge. I think that's what I heard.
That's what I'm saying. But be charged it, that's what we're proposing, and be charged it.
But why would they be waived at 0.3? It's like if their charge is $800 a month for sewer, and they pay 1/3 of that for 3 years.
They're not paying anything close to
They're not paying
that.
anything close to what everyone else is paying.
No, but they're not using it either.
But when they initially hook up, everyone else is paid to get that $4,000 hookup,
And it should be
and they're not paying
prorated.
anything.
Well, you could prorate it, yeah.
Well, I'm just saying.
It's a policy decision,
You
right?
don't wanna make
I
it too
just-
complex.
I just, and I'm speaking from my area only, is that anybody who's been paying that cost, the
Last
1/3
20 years.
for the past 20 years, are gonna say, well, so now you're telling me that if I wanna hook that up, I'm gonna have to pay 8,000, whatever the amount is?
What if it's 3 years ago?
I don't think. I mean, anybody that's had a piece of land is paying out 1.03
Yeah.
of
even if they're
EDO,
not-
since the sewer's been, since the sewer's been there, since 14, since they brought the EDU
So if
units
it's
in.
8.3 EDUs for 1 year, it should be exempt of the co-op charge.
I don't know if there's anyone that has been following that
New
category.
development, we're gonna put sewer. out.
No, if someone comes in and wants to put a new development in, okay,
No, what you're doing here. So we put sewer out to Commons,
yes,
there's vacant land there,
yes,
they start paying 0.3 of an EDU,
yeah,
they pay it for 1 year. And you're saying they should be exempt when they call to get their hookup?
well, that's a year, you're talking a year. These guys have been paying that 1/3 EDU for since 2014 with no development. So what I'm saying is, if they wanna put, this is my argument, if they wanna hook up a single EDU unit for a family home or whatever, they should, that 1/3, obviously that they're paying, will become a 1 unit like I pay, like anybody in the service area pays. I just don't think it's fair that after you're charging them to hold the place in line, that they get charged the $8,000 or whatever the fee is.
So in my example, if they don't do it in a year and they do it in 5 years, should they be exempt then?
You know what, I'm just speaking for my people. I'm just speaking
Well,
for.
maybe we need some options with respect to what
That's the
level
option I
of
have.
exemption you would get based on.
No, it costs money just to come there and actually make the connection. That's gonna cost thousands of dollars.
I know that.
So to not charge, like, I don't know, I don't get service done on my property right now on onsite sewage without having to pay.
No.
And I don't know how you can ask to be hooked up to a municipal system and not expect to pay something.
Pay something, what do we pay now? What do they charge now?
About $700 EDU unit, 1 unit.
No, that's operational.
That's
That's
operational.
completely different.
What's our hookup charge now?
Yeah, well, it's basically cost recovery, like if the lateral isn't already there, as part when the system went in years ago, and they would pay the actual cost to run the lateral to their property.
Yeah, but they're not paying towards the capital cost, which in a lot of cases they did in the very first, when it was originally built, but there aren't no more.
What is that average?
Well, we had some that's around 2,000, we have others we price at 20, and they're just.
It just depends.
Yeah, like in, say, other serviced areas, like, let's say the town of Bridgewater or something like that, like John Glen Allen, which is a recent subdivision, and there's vacant land there, and you do a development there, you have to pay some cost recovery charge to hook into the sewer. That's part of it. That's a very common setup.
So what about this idea? I'm just thinking, okay, so I have a lot in Western Shore for 10 years that I was paying the 0.03 EDU charge. So tomorrow I decide I want to put a
Oh, very good.
hook in. So if, let's say if the $8,000 is the cost. So can we go to these people that paid that 0.03 and say, you know what? You've paid this towards their, we'll give you credit for those years you paid on your
So that's what option B is here.
Oh, sorry.
Giving them a credit for any EDU charge.
Okay, sorry, I didn't read that right, sorry, yeah, there you go, that's fair.
The purpose of the EDU is to support the operations of the sewer. It's not about the capital, they're distinct. So when we want to do cost recovery, we don't reach back into our operational monies and say, well, there we go, that we funded that, because the reason why EDUs exist and why we have that regime in place is so that we can run the system. That's what the 0.3 and the ones and the multi-units that pay more than one EDU, that's what they all put into, so that the system can operate. We can't then reach back into that pot of money and say, now we're gonna use it to do capital improvements. That goes against the very premise of this document that we just reviewed with Tara.
Well, I just want to make clear and for the public record that I'm in favor of option B.
Yeah. I think there might be some middle ground.
I don't think so.
I just have one comment on that. If we're gonna be revising the sewer bylaw, there are probably a few other revisions we might wanna address. One in particular is, it's not clear right now, we have the 0.3 for unserviced well. And then the developed person wants to come up and they want to connect it. It's not clear as how many EDUs can be attributable to that lot in the future. So you might say, okay, if I want to put a single family home, no problem, it's one EDU. But I come in and I want to put an 8 or 10 unit apartment on that. Do I have a right to 8 EDUs or 10 EDUs? And it's not clear. I mean, so I think you probably want to clarify that the 0.3, say, gives you 1 as of right. And anything beyond that.
You gotta pay the capital
Oh,
cost.
and it would be also subject to the municipal engineer.
Would be
Saying
capacity.
it's capacity. But right now, it's just not clear, that's all.
Yeah.
I bet that the zoning would take care of that.
You could have
What
zoning.
their capacity would be and how many EDUs would be allocated in that zone.
Yeah,
And that's where we'd be faced right now, because a person could come in and say, listen, I'm zoned for a multi-unit here. So I want an EDU for every one of mine. And then municipal engineer might say, yeah, but I don't think we can handle it.
Well, that would be a planning problem that we should address.
yeah, and I
We
think
shouldn't have zones that
the
you can't
intention is,
service.
the intention is that if you establish this area, it's mandatory connection. If you were to develop.
If it's new,
Yeah,
yeah.
right, so.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I think that needs to be addressed, because right now there's a disconnect.
Okay, so where are we with it all? I don't know.
Yeah, so we were just looking for some direction from council on what we put in a bylaw, because you would need to see some, either a separate bylaw or amendments to the sewer bylaw, and there may be some amendments to the subdivision bylaw, depending on where we land. So just some direction on, when do you want the charges to apply? How do you want to deal with the ones that are currently paying a 0.3 EDU? And then what do you want to see that fee set at, the charge set at? So we're recommending 8. But I've provided a chart in there with as many of the ones that we could find in the province that currently have charges. It's not totally comprehensive, but
Well, 8's not too much, if you're not great.
now, don't forget that if the way it's applied to each EDU, so the intention is that if you're a multi-unit and you're multiple EDUs, you'd be paying 8 times.
But I'd like to see us do something in line with like what HRM has for their residential uses. So like it looks like around $6,000 per EDU, and then if it's a multi-unit building, then it's a reduced one,
lower.
because there's a bit of efficiency there.
Yeah, because it doesn't cost us as much to do the capital work.
Yeah.
So instead of 8,000, 6,000.
Well, it's sort of 61 that
Yeah, like I
does.
don't,
Right now, we don't
like
have.
if we find that it's not enough, we can always address that later, but it's 6,000. I mean, you see town of Bridgewater at 1,500, you know, and East King's 3,000, so I mean, it kind of bounces around.
So.
I think, you know, 6 might be an okay, you're not expected to get all of the money back out of this, it's just,
It's just to
it
help.
does cost something.
Yeah.
To install this stuff.
Just a way to. help
I'd be in
us.
favor of going something like 6,000 and then say like 3,500 or 4,000 per EDU in a multi-unit building.
Or
Above
commercial,
a
right?
certain number of.
So 6,000 for the first EDU's worth, and then if there's multiple EDUs assessed to that property or.
And the 3,500 per
3,500
additional.
per
EDU.
additional
Something like
EDU.
that.
Yeah.
I could go for
So
that.
that's right, because if you're building a mall or something like that, then, you know,
So-
half of it doesn't use a lot of sewer in the first place.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think we should also incorporate though the comments that Sam made.
Oh, sure, you want clarity.
Yeah.
It's gonna be fun.
I think while we're doing it, we may as well.
Yeah.
Takes it all.
The comments that Sam made are more of a problem now because you could be paying an EDU and you still have to come to us and ask if there's capacity to connect. What we're proposing is that if you're in the service area, you have a right to connect, you pay the capital connection fee.
Yeah.
So we're saying it's a mandatory connection. So if you were to develop, you're not asking us if we have capacity necessarily. We're
Telling you.
proactively making sure there's capacity. to make
I'm
it
actually a
connect.
little surprised, with my ignorance here, but I'm a little surprised that we would have zoned something and that they have as a right, and then they'd have to come groveling, asking for sewer
For sure,
connections.
well, look at the village, we've had
Yeah.
capacity issues forever in the village.
Yeah.
Well, then we need to address that in zoning.
Everybody
We have lots in the village where like you look at the potential for the hotel property and there, you know, yeah, if they have to come and ask.
Yeah, well, that's,
Back in the day, we were just assuming houses would be built on it.
plus then the zoning should reflect that. If that's what you want.
Well, or we build capacity.
Yeah, either way,
Yeah.
but don't just do one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so the only thing we have, like, I think we're pretty good on, we know we want a capital charge, and all that kind of stuff, if you're all on, or if it's new construction. What we haven't settled is what happens if you're already paying an EDU.
You know my feelings on it. I think they should be.
The
given-
1/3.
Yeah, I think the.
Yeah, they've been paying for the last 10 years.
Yeah, I think they should,
Because they're vacant lots.
they're vacant lots, but if they decide to hook me in, whatever they
Pay
paid, in-
something.
yes, but whatever they paid in that 1/3 cost.
They weren't paying capital, they weren't paying for capital.
No, but I understand that they were paying and getting nothing.
Because that's what the argument I get. They say, well, why am I paying? And I say, well, because that holds your place
They
in
had
line.
the right to hook on whenever they want.
They aren't getting nothing. As soon as that sewer went in front of their lot,
Their lot
that lot
value.
was worth more.
Yeah, their lot.
Like
value.
instantly, it's not like they got nothing from it.
That's true too.
We could charge them more taxes.
Anyway, that's my feeling. That's, you know, and I'm,
Depends on the value. of the
Six-
lot.
Well, no.
600, what's the EDU now?
EDU
600.
Oh, yeah.
676.
A third of that, 200.
75 cents.
So if it was 10 years, it'd be 2,000 off of the 80 if we were gonna do
Yeah.
that, you still pay 6.
I think
I
it's
don't have a
fair.
problem with that.
I think it's fair. I just, they paid, yeah.
It's better than, it's moving us
Yeah.
forward, as opposed to doing nothing.
If we're going to look at establishing a 6,000 for the first EDU and then a portion of that for the second and higher EDUs, would council consider maybe instead of the 6, they pay, if they're currently paying the 0.3 cents, whatever year, since.
Then
the-
they
since it
could
came in in
go with the
2014,
3,500
we could go with
cap.
the 3,500 for those ones, and then
There's at
that
least
gives them that,
5
but
years or something. I would think it'd at least be minimum 5 years they pay it to see.
We gotta move.
Yeah.
Why this additional complexity that we're baking into this potential policy for the one case, maybe out in Western Shore where one guy's been sitting on a lot for 20 years. paying
Well, there's a
nothing.
few more than that, but
I think it's different in Dallas area where they already have it established and been paying it for a number of years, where if we're gonna put a new one out somewhere else, it's completely new, it's a totally different.
yeah.
Well, it will be until 20 years from now.
Yeah, I understand
And
that.
then it'll be the same.
See the same
I see our
mistake.
Dallas issue. I do.
We need to do something.
I want to roof it off principle. Can't.
Well, that's okay. Principle's okay.
But if you're gonna say 3,500, you've only paid $1,000 over the last 20 years, they're getting an advantage.
Plus their lots worth things.
Well, it would be 10 years, but because the EDU unit came in 14, right? 2014 is when it started.
Yeah, and I think it was less than.
Less than 10. It would be about 9 years.
How much would they be paying?
Well, it depends. The EDU units has gone up. So basically it's a third of whatever every year would be. So you'd probably take an average of what, $200 maybe or less?
A little over two.
Say, about $1,800, give or take, right?
Okay. So if you give it to them for $3,500,
Yeah, but I cannot see us having a $3,500 chair, hookup chair.
that's what we just talked about.
Yeah.
They're talking about a $6,000 one for new.
For new people.
Yes,
So
3,500.
it's unreasonable to think that they wouldn't have to pay to hook up. I mean,
No, I'm not saying
Say
they
something, we're gonna have to run a line to your damn
absolutely,
house.
but they've,
Nothing else.
like you say, my argument is that they've paid for a service that they haven't received.
So compromise at 5,000. 3,500, they're gaining money. Let's try and make.
I just think that whatever they've paid in an EDU unit at 1/3, if they wanna hook something up there in a single, they should be given a credit. Now, whether that's 100% credit, or you wanna do it as a, 75% credit towards a hookup, I'm willing to negotiate, 75% I would do. But I just think they should be given some credit for the money they did there. And you know what, to be frank, if I didn't argue for that, I wouldn't be doing my people justice in my district.
What we're almost saying though, I guess I gotta look at this too, is that we shouldn't charge nothing. We're gonna give it back anyway. Right?
Don't even go there.
Well,
What is it on?
I know, but really, we're gonna give it back, why we charge it, what?
Well, that was one of
I'm
the.
arguing
Do we
for it.
charge for, solid waste collection on vacant land?
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do. Do
same
you
here.
get a service out of that?
I don't hear what your argument is on. I do not hear, well, yeah. well,
So when they built a house there, should they get free waste collection for
Well,
all the years?
but I pay waste collection in the woods. I don't get any service back here, and I know that, but it's part of the resource, it's why you get a resource charge that
It
is
costs
not.
money to take that truck in front of your yard, whether you take waste or not.
Andre, I'm not
And
arguing.
fire tax too. you
I-
pay tax ticket.
You're wrong.
No, it's not. I just don't think it's right that these people are paid and have to, and they don't get credit for anything that they paid for.
I like you, I love it, you're on the wrong side of
They
it.
may have been communicated in the
I know,
wrong
but I
way
don't
on
know how to move it at the moment.
it. The communication may not have been.
So I'm
Yeah, majority rules will.
majority will rule, but I don't even know if I know what I'm voting on just yet, even when we, so I'm just a little nervous if you put something out there, right? But
We're really just looking for direction at this point,
Right.
so we're not.
I'll make a motion that we,
Give direction, please, not a motion yet,
It's direction to staff.
direction.
all right, fine.
Okay.
But we
What
have
are
to,
you proposing for
I would
direction?
like to see something close to what HRM does, just clean, say around $6,000-ish for a new connection per EDU, and then for every additional, it'd be 3,500-ish. And hopefully that all work jives for Public Works, and just make it clean.
Second,
Just direction.
It's
Yeah.
just
They're gonna come back with.
I know, but we want them to come back.
second that.
Well, I'm gonna ask for agreement, not as long as I have them close to everybody. Then that's the direction we'll give
I don't think
staff.
it's
I don't want
gonna be
staff to
unanimous.
waste their time. I do not.
I agree.
You know what my stance is?
Okay,
I'm even willing to look at, if you don't wanna credit them for what they've paid on their 0.3, at least give them 75% credit towards the hookup.
So if they were paying 2,000 now, you're thinking 75% of that?
No, what I'm saying is,
Is 3,500 would get them,
no, what I'm saying is if over that 10 years that they've paid $1,000,
Right.
just say for a figure, in the EDU charge at the 0.3. I'm saying of that, so give them a credit of $750 towards the initial.
towards the initial, so 6,000 minus 750.
Yeah, whatever the 75%.
why don't we make it simple? If they're already paying EDU, they're at the $3,500 hookup range.
No.
If they aren't, well, I'm just trying to find.
Well, I
some
look
way.
at it this way, we pay like a garbage rate, and on a bigger lot, or I know on a camp lot, we pay garbage pickup and there's never ever a
No,
bag
no
put.
garbage pick, I don't know.
And, it's just the way it is.
Because it's all
And
very-
this is,
If
we pay it. we're not gonna get a refund on
Of
it.
course.
But you get a refund on your taxes, because the resource land tax is for nothing.
Okay,
Well, that's not the
It's
same.
nothing. I pay resource taxes, it's nothing.
Make it 5,000, not 3,500, I support it. 3,500, we're subsidizing twice.
But the trouble is it makes it complicated for those multi-unit users.
Yeah, 10 units are gonna pay a lot of money.
Yeah,
yeah,
Those people were paying for, I guess, and they were guaranteed a place, a hookup.
Mhm.
Because they didn't choose the hookup or because there's not a house there, that's the same, that's their decision.
And it increased the value of their lot.
So
because they
I
don't
think
have
it
to
just-
invest.
Unfortunately, they should have to pay it if they don't.
So do we want, do we want staff to come back with a fee that's $6,000
Square feet for my district.
and 3,500?
Yes.
$6,000 for a new hookup?
Regardless of whether you're paying.
Yeah, and it's, whether it's new or whether it's an existing structure. And if it's a multi-unit building or commercial building, 6,000 for the first and 3,500 for everything else.
So what about, what about what I suggested?
Well, all I'm saying is right now, that's not, not getting the consensus.
Well, when it comes for a vote, we'll
So-
just
So in terms,
show.
I'm not
I
off
mean,
the
we can
page,
debate, I love it.
Yeah, well, I didn't think it's wrong.
That's Tina?
so
More than-
I'm not off the page yet in terms of being favorably I'm supportive of the idea of the credit. Just haven't landed there yet with all this discussion. So I'm not pretending anything by sitting here. I'm not off that page yet. I'm thinking of individual situations, and I know we can't make it about individuals, but I have to say, you're representing your community. That's what you've heard. That's the only thing we can do here. So good for you. Good for you. I'm not off that page. I'm not. I'm just saying it out loud.
And I've heard, and and when I first came to council, I asked what that charge is for, because I was asked. And it guarantees your right to hook up.
Right.
Now, back then, I was under the impression that there wasn't enough capacity on that sewer to do that, so why were they paying the money? But that's an argument from before, but I would just like to say, I'm not trying to say give them everything free, but I think we should value what they paid in a sense. Whether it's 75%, I'm not saying 100%, I still say they should have at least 75%.
Well, this is what I want to say, because I want to just dispel this myth, please. The charge, the 0.3 EDUs is not a retainer so that you can get to hook up one day.
Absolutely it is.
No, it isn't.
What, was it or wasn't?
Let me complete my statement.
Well, your first statement was wrong, so I can the rest of it.
Okay,
The purpose of that 0.3 EDU is because it costs money to operate a sewer. And there's a length of main in front of that property that costs money to maintain, and that 0.3 EDU is a cost to operate that amount of main and whatever.
but it does give them the right to hook up.
That it does, but it's operational money. That's the purpose of the EDU. It's all about operating
It's
the
not
system that we have.
So you explain to the resident that, when you're conveyed the message that this is what the money's for.
902-277-1409.
Yeah.
Anybody watching this, call me and I'll explain it to you.
Anyway, that's my opinion, and I'll leave it at that.
So if we charge $6,000 for the main hookup, 3,500 if you're if it's a multi-unit for each additional one. And we give a break of $1,000 if you're already paying the EDU, and it's $5,000 if you're already paying the EDU.
For the first one.
For the first one,
Absolutely.
I just want to give
I
something.
agree with that. I agree with
I'm
that.
good.
I agree with that.
agree with that personally.
It's only a $1,000 break.
I know, but I'm only, if I agree to it, it wouldn't have anything, it wouldn't be rooted in logic or any kind of soundness of mind, it would only because I just get tired of listening to Ed Dillon.
Yeah. And it's trying to move it forward. Right now, we're not.
Warm it
trying to-
down.
Yeah, okay, so come back with that proposal.
Thank you.
See, Adele, just like a nice comment. What we're supposed to do around the table is argue.
That's right.
You said you don't want to argue with Andre.
Absolutely, I like arguing.
Yes, so that's what I'm saying. So it's all about